And joining us now is Josh Harkins. He serves in the Mississippi State Senate. He's from Rankin County, serves as the chairperson of the Senate Finance Committee, which means his job is to make sure we got enough money to pay all the bills. Senator, good to have you.
Good morning, Gerard. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So we had, I thought, sort of a moderately eventful 2023 session. It seemed like 2022 had a lot more stuff going on.
Well, there was 22 was really busy, obviously with the tax bill in my lane. So that kept us pretty busy all session. And 23, I think we touched on a lot of issues. I think it was more of a good spread of of shotgun blast more so than a focus of really concentrating on taxes and everything the prior session. We touched a lot of issues. We touched election reform. We touched adoption. We touched hospital grants. We touched infrastructure. That was a big deal we did this past session. So we touched a lot of areas. And look, in the session, there are 3,000 bills that get filed. You got everybody coming from every different angle with legislation, and so it's hard to get everything. But I think we've been very productive over the last 4 years, I think, in what we've accomplished and what we've done and where we are.
And what's our financial condition?
Our financial position right now in Mississippi is pretty good. I don't know if there's ever been another time. Obviously, I've only been here. This is my 12th year, but I don't know if there's ever been a time where we've been in a better position financially in our state. Our rainy day fund is full. We have not authorized any new bonds or basically taken any debt out there. We've paid off almost over $500 million in debt. Mm-hmm. We're bringing our overall debt obligation down close to $4 billion. Our statutory limit on borrowing is about probably $12-13 billion, but we're about close to $4 billion by the end of this year. We'll have paid off. Sitting on a good pile of reserves. Got the revenues are still coming in pretty good. So I think we're in a good position. We've put in a tax cut that we talked about earlier that's going to put more money in Mississippians' hands, and this is a very shortened tax cut. It's not an extended one like the one we passed in 2016 that was a 10-year implementation. Mm-hmm. This is a almost twice the size and half the time tax cut. So I think both of these will actually be coming to full absorption by 2026 or so, I believe. So we'll have both of those implemented by that time. But putting close to $550 million back in the taxpayers' pockets.
Plus our rainy day fund.
Yeah, our rainy day fund. We're set to withstand a storm if it comes. And I think that's important. Our fiscal responsibility has put us in this position, taking responsible, measured steps, and the state's in a really good position right now.
And there's a statutory maximum, right?
10%.
10% of general fund?
General fund.
Yeah. So we're sitting at, what, $700 million?
It's right at $700 million, yeah.
In the rainy day fund.
In the rainy day fund.
So to recap, rainy day fund is full. We have not borrowed money like we have. Our capacity is about 3 times more than what we really got outstanding in terms of debt right now.
If you put it in layman's terms, if you bought a $200,000 house, you got about probably 25-30% debt on it.
Yeah, that's where we are.
It's a great position to be in.
Yeah, and I've been watching the revenues. I get the reports. I'm sure you do too from the Department of Revenue, and so they've trended. I wouldn't say trended down, but the difference year over year is down somewhat, but still up.
It's still up,
and we're still up over estimates.
But we baked in some of these cuts that we were expecting in the income tax. Obviously, we've only got 6 months of the tax cut in this fiscal year because if our fiscal year ends June 30th. So we've got the first 6 months of this year, and then the second part of the calendar year will go into fiscal year 24 budget. But yes, the revenues are still coming in good. They're a little lower year over year, but that was to be expected.
Yeah, and the tax cut that's in effect now, the portion of the tax reform is the elimination of the 4%.
4% bracket. That was about $185 to $190 million estimated.
Yeah. $200 a taxpayer, essentially.
Yes, and in the next year we'll go from a 5%. We'll have a flat rate.
Yep.
That rate will drop from 5 to 4.7 in the following year, from 4.7 to 4.4 in the following year to 4.
So we phase it in.
Over the 3 years.
Yep.
No triggers, just a gradual decrease in the rate.
And then we'll have a single flat rate of 4% on all income taxable income above $10,000.
Correct. And then you include your standard deductions and everything else. But I think it sets a good precedent of where our head is on fiscal matters as it relates to taxes. We put in, a really good tax cut that's going to give. It's meaningful. It's going to give money back to taxpayers. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how revenues are trending, and as long as we've got record revenues coming in, as long as we're trending in the right direction, I think we'll continue to look at tax cuts and putting more money back into the hands of Mississippians. Something
that didn't get over the finish line the last 2 years that we hear about a lot, certainly here at the program, is the citizen ballot initiative process.
Yeah.
Can't seem to get on the same page on that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think we'll get one. I'm for a ballot initiative. I think that's something that is important. I think what you don't want to do is you don't want to see what's happened in California and these other states where every year there's just issues that are all over and the threshold is so low that it makes it easy for something to get in. And I don't think it should go in the Constitution. I think it should go in the statute. I think, thank goodness the medical marijuana program is not in the Constitution. That is not where you regulate an industry. We don't regulate any other industry in our Constitution. I think it's important that we do it in statute. That way we can come through and adjust. We had some adjustments this year in the cannabis law, and I think we'll have adjustments going forward. I think as any regulation of any industry that there is, you want the flexibility to move and to pivot, and I think that's important. And if it would have been in the Constitution, it would have been very cumbersome and difficult to manage.
But in fairness, though, the bill that the House that originated in the House, it did in fact address statute. It would allow citizens to put a measure on the ballot that would amend or establish statute, and the folks in the House, I think, agreed with that, concurred with you that we don't really want this thing to be a situation where citizens at the ballot box are putting laws, essentially, like a medical marijuana program, in the Constitution.
Yeah.
That process ought to be reserved for the legislature refers an amendment to the ballot, which is how we amend our Constitution, and the voters vote on it, and we keep these kinds of citizen-initiated measures to statute, which makes a whole lot more sense. So hopefully we'll see something get going on that.
I want to go. Yeah. Excuse me. I want to go back to taxes real quick. You hear people. I've had people come up and talk to me about the whole elimination of income tax and how we're getting there, and what people need to understand is right now, last fiscal year, we brought in $2.5 billion in individual income tax out of $7.3 billion, and so that's about 34% of your revenue. Yep. If you wanted to, and some had plans of eliminating over 5 years or 7 years, and I want to give you an idea of what that means in how you're going to adjust your spending. If you eliminated these agencies, okay, think about this: $2.5 billion. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to fund government and all the services that everybody is wanting and desiring. If you eliminate it, and this is hypothetical, I don't want anybody saying that Josh Harkins advocated to eliminate these agencies, but if you cut the Attorney General's department completely, you eliminated audit, Secretary of State, Wildlife, Corrections, Mental Health, Department of Health, DHS, Child Protective Services, Department of Revenue, Department of Public Safety, Homestead Exemption, Military, and our Department of Rehab Services, that's only $1.49 billion. You still got to come up with another $1 billion of cuts. Right. There.
So, Senator, though, does that analysis also contemplate the surpluses?
No, it does not. It does not do that. But I'm giving perspective of how much you got to cut Now, that doesn't
Fair
touch education. It doesn't touch Medicaid. It doesn't touch.
Those are the big ticket items.
Those are the big ticket items.
Yeah.
So it's not, how you do this matters. And I think that's what I want people to understand is that, we're trying to make responsible decisions on how we, work our taxes lower to eventually eliminate. That'd be great. But also, how do you, growth is part of that.
Yeah.
We have to grow into this at some level.
Let's talk about it on the other side of the break. You
Absolutely.
good? Yeah,
Yep.
We got Senator Josh Harkins in the Element Wealth Studios. Stay with us. The great David Bowie. Little Ziggy. Rhino, I went to an event last night, and several people were discussing with me, approached me and said that they enjoyed the show, but they especially enjoy your musical selections.
Yeah, you got some good
I appreciate
music.
that.
We are in the Element Wealth Studios visiting with Senator Josh Harkins, just talking about, he chairs, of course, the Senate Finance Committee. That means he's responsible for making sure we got enough money to pay all the bills and just attending to our financial status and keeping us in good shape with respect to the possible need, which we hope we don't have, to borrow money. We'd like not to have to, but when we do, it's pretty dang good when you got good credit ratings, good bond ratings, so you pay the lowest interest rates when you go to the market to sell bonds. And we're in pretty good shape there, aren't we, Senator?
Yes, we are. I mean, you look at our debt and just the position we're in right now, I think it's being able to pay off debt over the last 2 years without authorizing any new debt is a good thing, and hopefully we can continue that another year based on the way our revenues are trending.
Yeah, and some states aren't so fortunate.
No, I think California's got
$32 billion.
Yeah,
deficit.
that's just ridiculous.
$32 billion
But
deficit.
that's why they're hemorrhaging citizens moving to other states. You just hope they leave their voting tendencies behind if that's what they voted for.
And it does matter because a short 2 years ago, $100 billion surplus.
Yeah.
In 2 years, they flipped that. And that's just because, hey, we got all this money. Let's run in there and spend it, which is what they did. And now they're facing a deficit. But I think it's an honest statement that our legislature and our state leaders, you included among them, saw that extra money coming in, but were prudent about it.
Yeah.
And took care of business, paid down debt, flushed out our rainy day fund, and we've got a couple other reserve funds too, don't we? As well.
There's a few things, but it's a holistic approach that all of us, I think, bought into. That this is a generational opportunity, and we did not want it to go to waste. We didn't want to just willy nilly throw money out there at things that because. Lord knows, I can tell you, as Representative Lamar would too, there is no shortage of requests for monies for projects across the state, infrastructure. But I think that was one of the things we wanted to focus on. We wanted to make a diligent and prudent investment in our infrastructure,
sure,
water, sewer, infrastructure, roads, bridges. That's what gets our economy moving. That's what's going to help our communities grow. And that's where a bulk of our investments went.
So a question on the C Spire text line for you from Mike from Madison. The money sitting in our rainy day fund, is it how is that structured? Is it invested in accordance with state law? Is it just sitting in a money market account? How does that work?
It's sitting in it does allow our treasurer to invest it, I believe, similar like CDs or whatever, but last fiscal year, I think we made $15 million on our cash reserves.
Okay.
This year, so far, I think we're at like $56 million.
Well, rates are up.
Rates are up,
yeah.
So they are investing that money, and it is part of the revenue that's coming into the state. But that money is there. You can't have it in anything that you can't get your hands on it quick if you needed it. So it's just basically sitting there in cash, and I believe the treasurer is investing it in some pretty liquid.
And that's a good point.
Yeah.
You could certainly go invest it in 30-year Treasury bonds, but you got to have access to it. It's a rainy day fund.
It's a rainy day fund.
That's its purpose, is to be there as a reserve and accessible and liquid.
Now, and I'll tell you, what constitutes a rainy day? That's that's the part that's kind of up in the air, and that's stuff that we have to come to agreement on to use that money. We've done things in the past where we've just cut budgets and we haven't used a whole lot of it. In the past, and I think we've tried to be pretty methodical about how we've used it. to keep it up. But when I first got in here, we didn't have much of a rainy day
Well, I was going to say, it hadn't always been full.
It hasn't.
At the statutory limit.
No.
So there have been times when we have been concerned about if we had the so-called rainy day emergency, where the heck we're going to get money to deal with that. But so I certainly hats off to you guys for making sure that we're running things with some degree of conservative fiscal thought and just prudence. You were just sharing with me off the air something that's gotten national attention with respect to tax policy here in the state regarding immediate expensing of capital investment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Senator Johnson sponsored a bill that basically allows businesses to take an immediate and full deduction for research, experimental, for expenditures for business assets that are qualified property, improved property. That's the year it's put into service. So it's immediate expensing. So you don't have to spread it out over a number of years. You can take that credit immediately. And what it does is it typically will spur investment. And wages are going up, investments going up. They're allowed to take that full expensing deduction that first year it's in service.
Yeah, a key provision of the Trump tax cuts that's unfortunately now being phased out.
Yep.
And there have been calls from Republicans on the Hill, and certainly here on this program, we've called for it as well. We need to make that permanent. That is really good tax policy, and we need to make that permanent. Let's talk for a minute about the hospital grant program that was enacted into law, $104 billion this past year as a way to provide a sort of a lifeline, a financial lifeline to some of the struggling hospitals. It's come now to light. We received a letter here at SuperTalk from one of the hospitals, Winston County, I believe, the CEO there, that said that this money is really not accessible as they thought, that it's just not a straight grant available to meet certain expense needs and to cover certain shortfalls. What do you know about this? What's going on?
I've just heard recently about this, and I think that, obviously COVID put a strain on our hospitals, and so it was the prudent use of ARPA funds to help try to do something for our hospitals. I think the way that we structured it was based on beds, like a grant based on the number of beds they have, but all ARPA funds have to be used in a way that follow the rules with the legislation from Congress. So there are certain expenses that hospitals have that are eligible, and there's certain ones that are not. Like I said, I don't know enough about the rub because this wasn't brought up during the legislative session, and we didn't realize that. But if we have to come back in a special session and do something, or if we can do something in January, when we come back in, we maybe can make some changes. But I think that the allowable charges that are allowed, the hospitals can use them for. I just don't know what the difference is. And when we first were talking about this and meeting with them, what's changed.
So the CEO, of Winston Medical Center, Paul Black, he said that essentially the legislation would not make any funds available to the Winston Medical Center just because it doesn't meet the ARPA requirements of reimbursing for COVID expenses, that they've already covered all those through other programs. So sounds like maybe something you guys need to look at. It might not be as readily available, I guess, to the hospitals that need it as thought. It's not just strictly based on beds. You may apply for these grants to cover certain financial obligations at these various hospitals and take care of that. But I wanted to pass it on. We just got informed of it late last week.
Yeah. It wasn't. I didn't hear anything about that during the session. I think this was all something we were working towards to try to help hospitals. So
yeah. Let's something else that's a bit sticky. You and I have had some offline conversations about that ain't going away. Is PERS.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about that?
Well, I've actually talked to the director, Mr. Higgins, the other day, and we're supposed to meet here in the next week or two. They've had some meetings. During the session, they had some meetings, and they took a step back from the position they took on increasing the employer contribution by 5%.
Right.
And they're going to look at some other ways. And they've always talked about different ideas of how to make PERS more sustainable, and that's what we're going to visit with over the summer, some of the findings they've had. And I think Their meetings are public. They've talked about possibly creating a fifth tier or something like that. I don't know specifically what their ideas are, but I know that if you raise 5% on the employer contribution, that's going to, in my opinion, equate to a very large tax increase on the local level. Our cities, our counties, our school districts are going to probably have to raise millage to cover that.
Yeah,
and
property taxes.
Yeah. And it's that's a big. It's going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
So,
it needs to be addressed, though. You guys know it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I've talked to him about, and we'll meet here in the next couple of weeks and continue conversations up until the session.
We got to go, but I'd like to see candidates, even at the statewide level, start talking about this a little bit more, because it's a serious problem. It's not going to go away.
No.
We need a solution for it.
It impacts. I mean, it's part of our budget. It's part of our responsibility, and it's something that we have to oversee and we'll have to deal with.
Senator, appreciate you coming in.
Thanks,
Always
Gerard.
good to see you,
Thanks
sir.
for having me.
Thanks a lot. We're coming right back here in the Element Wealth Studios. Please stay with us.